It's another lovely day in Ayrshire, so I thought, why not have a road trip? So I hopped on the bus, as that's how I roll, coasted through the Ayrshire countryside and brought you to one of the most impressive places in Scotland when it comes to retro video games. And that's quite simply this rather unassuming place on the outskirts of the small town of Stewarton, Forgotten Worlds. But enough of me havering on, let's go in and have a look at this wonderful, wonderful place.
And my first experience was "Oh my giddy aunt," which simply translated means I was quite impressed. Now I know a lot of people out there don't seem to appreciate these retro video stores holding stock such as these figures and other collectibles, but personally I think it's a part of the experience. And also, if a little bit of a side hustle helps keep these businesses running, well, I'm all for it. And especially if the range runs all the way through horror, science fiction and WWE figures. Because let's face it, we might be video gamers at heart, but it's the whole pop culture that seems to draw us in. It does for me anyway. And yes, I also know that Funko vinyl pop figures are a bit of a Marmite item, but there's got to be at least one vinyl pop figure that you love, and if you try to tell me that there's not one out there for you, well, I'm pretty much going to call you on that. And yes, this is where my eyes widened completely, because we were moving on to a section where they were holding their 8 and 16-bit microcomputers. Now of course I don't know what age you are or when you grew up with video games, but the microcomputers back in the 80s in the UK were how we gamed at home. So not only do I have a lot of nostalgia for the microcomputers and a lot of love still for them, you've got to admit they're just so sexy looking. And it was also nice to see that the store wasn't limited to just actual vintage retro machines. There was a lot of items like the Atari flashbacks, the Evercades, and even the Retron machines, which opens up that era of gameplay to just so many more people. And of course, there's the video games themselves. Now, Forgotten Worlds doesn't just stock UK PAL games. As a matter of fact, their main focus is on imports, so that's Japanese games and North American games. And you may be thinking that these table displays here look a little bit bare. Well, that's down to the fact that the Donington game market is this week, and the owners of the store are down there at the moment where they're stalling out and selling some of their stock down there, rubbing shoulders with the likes of the wonderful Stu from Tutti UK and Dana from Hidden Chest and many more wonderful traders in the retro market. Now this didn't bother me too much because, as you can see, there's plenty of stock still on display, and it was much less for me to rummage through to find something that I maybe wanted to pick up. And here we have another highlight for me, a Neo Geo, and I have never seen a Neo Geo in the flesh before, so coming to a place like this really does give you an experience that you've never had before. Well, it did for me anyway, and I'm fairly confident that there's plenty of people out there like me that haven't had the experience of laying hands on these machines. Now I'll quite happily admit I'm not a big Star Wars Episode 1 fan, but a traditional battleship Star Wars game, well, it caught my eye for a moment or so. And seriously, again, another machine I never thought I would ever see in the flesh, but it's all here at places like this. And there's even some big box collector's editions for modern consoles, or what I would call a modern console, and Godzilla here had to spend a moment just for ZX Tetley. And a little future pickups video spoiler, I forgot to go back to that Final Fantasy Coke bottle top tub, so left without any, but I will be back to Forgotten Worlds to pick some up ASAP. They even had a nice display of some of the more collectible figures when it comes to pop culture, and for those out there that are into the waifu scene, and I'm not going to say whether I am or not, there was a good selection of those too. Now, back in the day I was a big fan of posters and had plenty of these things up on my bedroom wall. But these days, if it takes up room from actually being able to collect more video games, I tend just to shy away from it. Now, graphic novels and comics aren't really a big thing for me. I didn't really grow up with them in the west of Scotland. Actually, the first comic book or graphic novel that I ever purchased for myself was the one that was released for Batman the movie back in the late 80s. Now, I'm sure a few people think that's quite an early one, but many people out there will know that's not an early comic. It's certainly not an early introduction to graphic novels and comics. I do of course appreciate how pretty they are and how important they are to some people. And for yet another time, my mind was blown as I walked into this back corner of Forgotten Worlds, because arcades were a huge part of my gaming history. Back in 1980 I was introduced to Space Invaders, which led to Battlezone, then Defender, Pac-Man and so on. And for the entirety of the 80s and halfway through the 90s, arcades were so important to me when it came to a gaming fix. We don't however see many arcades these days, well we certainly don't in the west of Scotland, and to stumble on this, well even if this was the entirety of Forgotten Worlds, I would have walked away a happy man today. There was a lovely selection of classic and absolutely top-notch arcade games for you to play and relive the glory days. And on your way out as you're heading to the cash registers, there was a selection of Japanese and American candies and snacks, just to get your sugar levels back up because you'd probably worn yourself out with all the excitement.
So the gimbal's away and I've unplugged my mic, so you're just going to have to put up with the audio and video of just my phone. But what did you think of Forgotten Worlds? I had an absolute blast in there. I did pick up a couple of items, won't be showing them in this video. Upcoming pickup video will show you that goodness. Drop down into the comments, let me know what you thought of that remarkable little place, and until next time, as always, cheerio.